Nevertheless, the dimness shall not be such as was in her vexation, when at the first he lightly afflicted the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, and afterward did more grievously afflict her by the way of the sea beyond Jordan, in Galilee of the nations.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Continuing in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2. And we are at verse 34. Well, we talked about verse 34 a bit. We read it anyways. This is Simeon blessing the Lord and Mary and Joseph. And he said this, behold, this child is set for the fall and rising again of many in Israel, and for a sign which shall be spoken against. You know, not just in Israel, but generally. You know, there's always doubters, right? There's always doubters, not just doubters of the events, but of the efficaciousness, the wisdom. There's some people who think in this modern times, you know, they don't believe anything about Christianity is true, such as Jesus rising from the dead, but they do think there's something deeper true. Like it's true on some spiritual level, that there's some sort of value. You know, they look at the religion, and as often as not, very many religions, any ones especially that last so long, it's having some sort of value to humanity, etc., etc. But there are also those who think it has no value, who think that, you know, in some ways, I could say they don't understand, and maybe that's true. In some cases, it's doubtless true that they just don't understand. Sometimes I hear people talk about Christianity in a negative way, and I think they don't even understand Christianity. I don't know if that means if they had it explained to them properly, they would. When I was young, I used to think that if I could just explain it to people, you know, according as I understood it, the way that made sense to me, they would make sense to them, and not only that, they would accept it. Because making sense or not is not necessarily why they hate it. I mean, could be a number of reasons. Or maybe they just hate righteousness. They hate being constrained in any way. The idea of self-control. They see religion as an attempt to control people. But, you know, there are all kinds, you know, if religion is defined as attempts to control people, then government is also religion. That's why so often in the past, religion and government were intertwined so tightly. Because religion was the moral authority that government drew from. Why not? Well, Marduk will be mad, you know. So they would derive their authority. The king's authority would be the gods approved of the king, you know. And so, you know, is there any religion that isn't if there's a religion that's just an attempt to free people, and then also an attempt to control them in a way, to not allow them to create a structure for themselves. You know, like, I want to have a completely unstructured religion with no rules, and not, you know, that in itself is a rule. No rules. One rule, no rules. That's a big rule. Everyone has rules they govern themselves by. You know what I mean? Everyone does. You know, even if it's like sinister, wicked rules. You're like, this is how you dispose of a body, you know, if you don't want to get caught. I mean, there's bad rules to people, but they live by them. They control their behavior by them. I always think it's an empty charge. It's an empty charge because men are always trying to control each other and their own behavior. whether it be to, not care about social norms, like to let loose and just, a lot of times that's what people think control. They're like, what they mean is sex. They almost always, that's the number one thing, is like they want to be promiscuous and they want to see their prostitutes. They want to have all these freedom to explore all these sexual, what would you say, appetites they find themselves experiencing. They have appetites, and they want to pursue them, and they don't like anything that says, well, that's wrong, or you should control yourself. You shouldn't just fulfill every appetite. You see what happens when you fulfill every appetite with food? You'll end up weighing 500 pounds. And while sex doesn't have the same impact like that, it does have a psychological, mental effect. But I mean, I generally don't dwell on the pragmatic reasons for rules. Some rules are there for pragmatic reasons, meaning it has a purpose. Like, you shouldn't steal because if you steal, then where will we be as a society? Because it's going to have a negative impact, and there's all these good reasons. People try that with some of the dietary restrictions too. They'll say like, oh, well, the Bible said you shouldn't eat this and that because it's best for your health. Or they'll say, but then you get to things like, why should people wear tassels on their garments and observe such and such a feast? And there's no reason in the world. The feast has a little stronger reason. It's like, to remember this. But tassels on your garments, it's also to remember that. But the problem is you can wear the tassels without remembering. You can do all the external things without remembering. It says Jesus sort of upended a lot of the, the conventional wisdom at the time of how the Jews' religion ought to be followed. He didn't just like when Paul came in to the church, the things he preached were new even for a lot of the Christians because it was so early and they didn't know what to do with Gentiles. And so Paul saying Gentiles don't have to become Jews first was somewhat controversial. Right, but what Jesus did, essentially eliminating the sacrificial system, and by his sacrifice, there's only a very small minority of Christians who believe we have to keep all the Old Testament commandments. And sometimes people misunderstand when they think about keeping the Old Testament commandments. The commandments are the things you need to do, but I wonder how they excuse themselves for not stoning people who do certain offenses. Because that's what the law says, that in such a case. But the thing is, the law, as Jesus made it clear, that the law makes room for mercy also. It's just that is the punishment for those sins. Does not mean, but the scripture also says that because they don't carry out punishments, wickedness fills the land. And they didn't very often carry them out. That's why I was especially grinding when they bring that woman before Jesus, because I don't believe the Jews had the right to execute people under the Romans, or maybe women weren't counted as people at that. That happens sometimes. I don't know. But anyways, many people's fortunes would rise or fall because of the Lord. Like ultimately, the whole nation was brought down within a generation of his coming. And yea, a sword shall pierce through thy own soul also, that the thoughts of many hearts may be revealed. Now, the parenthetical part they got right. There should be parentheses there, because a sign which shall be spoken against, that the thoughts of many hearts may be revealed. What better way to reveal the thoughts of the heart than the mouth speaking. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh, the scriptures say. So the things that your heart is filled with often have a way of coming out. And so the thoughts of many hearts are revealed. Christ is a polarizing figure. Think I am come to bring peace in the world? No, you're wrong. I've come to bring a sword, for I shall set husband, brother against brother, father against son, mother against daughter, and blessed is he that is not offended in me. And of course, the sign that is spoken against most, of course, is the crucifixion. But a lot of it, like if you think about it, for example, the Messiah came, and when they were confronted with him, the chief priests and the leaders, the thoughts of their heart was revealed. If the people believe in him, the Romans will come and take away our place. They feared the excitement. They feared the Romans, and that's totally believable. That's no stretch. I mean, not just that it's written. I'm just saying for a person who is skeptical. The idea that the leaders didn't like what he was doing. They didn't like that he was upending the doves and the tables, or did he upend the tables of the money changers in the temple and all that? Sure. But it was also the very fact that the people, like in the streets, calling out Hosanna in the highest, and that they believed he was the Messiah. They feared, where might this lead? Because they believed the Messiah would come and restore the kingdom to Israel. And they thought, what if he tries to do that? What if he tries to restore the kingdom to Israel? What if he leads the people in a revolution? The Romans will come and take away our place, the nation, and also their position of power and authority among the Jews. So the things that happen to Christ, you see many thoughts of their hearts revealed. It's like they fear the Romans more than God. They fear the coming of the Messiah because of what it might make the Romans do, because they fear the Romans more than they trusted the Lord. And that's not, that's human nature. I mean, it's easy to fear the things you see right in front of you more than you trust God. It's very easy to do. It's always real easy also to be like, if I had been in the days of the Pharisees, I wouldn't have done as they did. I would have trusted God and believed Jesus. But it's easy to think that. But is that what you do in your current life? And it's not that it's the end of the world if you do find yourself often more afraid of man than you are of God. But it's an area we need to work on. It's an area we need to remedy. It's an area we need to pray about. We need to be aware. You got to know, I need this sword to pierce through my own heart also, so I know what I'm really like. He was speaking to Mary and Joseph, but he might as well be speaking to me. And that's a very important thing. Because who would love him more than his own mother? Who would stand behind him more than his own mother? But Simeon's prophecy says, no, you also will be pierced through. There's a sword the purpose of the sword to pierce through your heart is the idea that it's testing. You're going to, like, what's really at the bottom of everything? Or that something inside you has to die. A sword to the heart is death. I mean, could there be a more apt analogy? You slay me. It keeps I always thought it was interesting. I remember as a kid seeing those little hearts with the arrows through them, or a sword. Maybe a little scroll work like a tattoo. Maybe someone's name. She pierced my heart. Because everyone has defenses. Everyone has notions and a hardness, a shield sort of protecting their inner being, who they are. as much as she loved her son, and she would be in that society, but she would be in that society a Jew. Yeah, I mean, there was a time where during his ministry, his family thought he was crazy because he was doing all these things suddenly. Suddenly, all these people were following him, and they would come around and they'd be like, "Hey, we'd like to see you. Why don't you come out and talk to us?" And they were trying to interfere essentially, like, "Why don't you come on home and stop this whole Messiah business?" Because you think about it, both Mary and Joseph, in the other gospel, it's made clear that Joseph obviously knows that his wife is carrying the son that he did not put there. And originally, he thought he would quietly put her away because he didn't want to make a spectacle out of her, right? But instead, he married her and took the son as his own. And here's the thing. Most people thought Jesus was Joseph's son, right? In the town they lived in. So they didn't make it known. It wasn't like Mary all the time growing up was like, "My boy's going to be the Messiah. Yes, the Holy Spirit gave me a baby." No, she concealed it. She concealed it. And so did Joseph. They were both complicit in this. They hid it. They were attached to their child, their son, what they knew him to be. And when he started showing himself as something more, something they didn't expect, something they didn't really understand. You know what I mean? Because angels can come and say all that, but then 30 years go by. 30 years. It's a long time. Your son gets to be 30. About 30, it says. And then he starts doing things that you don't expect and that you don't particularly care for and you think might get him in trouble. And what will the neighbors say? Because we're talking about somebody who cares about what the neighbors say. Cares about what the community says, what the community thinks. Or it's through thy soul, not heart, but similar. I mean, a sword through your soul is a better analogy to let you know that, like, it's testing and piercing down to who you are. Because your soul is more about who you are as a person than it is about like the physical body. If I say heart, but heart, I could say pierce through the heart, it'd be the same type of thing, right? Piercing through thy own soul also. I see where I got it, because the thoughts of many hearts are revealed. Okay. So that you know what's at the bottom of people. They had things to be revealed to. What did they care about? And this isn't necessarily a bad thing. But it's a necessary thing. I need to know that my soul also needs to be pierced. So I got to see what's at the bottom of who I am. I got to see the ways in which I am like a Pharisee, or I am like someone who cares about, the community more. That's not a real good accusation for me, but the community more than what I care about what God thinks. I've never been a very community-minded person. Yeah. So anyways, but there are certainly things, I may not have many thoughts for the community, but I know I've had thoughts about the banks and the utilities and the money people and what they might do, More than God, I don't know, but they are closer than he is, I certainly know there were times when I was just way too freaked out about circumstances in my life, and I should have been more mindful of the Lord than mindful of the circumstances of my life. Meaning I should have just kept, things worked out anyways, that had no, my worrying didn't fix it. It's one thing if, you're worried because, I don't know, like I always say, you want, if you have work to do, but then sometimes things come up, things happen, circumstances intervene, you have say you work, but you're working paycheck to paycheck, and something problem happens with your car and you don't have the money to do it, so you charge on the credit card. Now you got credit card bill every month, but you're already living paycheck to paycheck. But so paying that off is now a super challenge. You got to cut back on certain things. Maybe you don't eat as much. It's rough. You know? And those circumstances can be very harrowing. I spent many years living paycheck to paycheck. You know? But it does harden you a bit against fear of those kind of things. Because, like, what are you going to do? Sorry, I had a popcorn kernel come out of my tooth. Must have had a wild night. No, I'm just kidding. I meant the popcorn kernel, that it was there all night. All right. That was silly. That the thoughts of many hearts may be revealed. All right. And there was one Anna, a prophetess, the daughter of Phanuel, of the tribe of Aser. It's Aser here in Greek. Another example of the Greek transliteration being translated into English and losing some of the force. Remember, in Hebrew, the letter SH is actually just one letter. So when they copy it, they didn't copy it phonetically, but they did in the Old Testament phonetically. But when they went into Greek, they went non-phonetically, but transliterated the letters. I forgot they have a separate S, like a shin and a sin or something like that. I forgot. Hebrew is much more not my. I have a lot of the scant knowledge I have in Greek. I have even less of Hebrew. It may seem sometimes like when I talk about these Greek and Hebrew words, it's just from being familiar with looking them up. There's no actual underlying superior training or scholarship on my part. I always like to make that clear. I'm not putting on airs. It's just that sometimes one needs to look into these things. And it's good to understand them, at least from the level of an English-speaking person, to understand that Aser is Asher. The tribe of Asher, the son of Jacob. Asher, the son of Jacob, one of the 12 patriarchs, the 12 tribes. Now, oftentimes, there's a very popular out there, not very popular, but it's widespread, let's put it that way. There is a widespread belief, sometimes characterized as Anglo-Israelism or the identity movement, Christian identity, which relies on the idea that during the Assyrian captivity, the northern kingdom of Israel disappeared. Meaning, when the Assyrians conquered Israel, because after Solomon, the son of David, David, the famous king of Israel, who took the place of Saul, who God rejected, their first king. David was the second king. Solomon was the second in his line. Everyone remembers the wisdom of Solomon. Well, Solomon's son wasn't so wise, and he took some bad advice, and it wound up with a civil war. And he lost half the kingdom, 10 of the tribes. Judah and Israel were on similar as far as footing. There was a period of civil war between them, but he lost the northern tribes. 10 tribes. Geographically, he lost the geography of 10 tribes, maintaining just Judah and Benjamin. But then they go on. But eventually, then that lasted for a couple centuries, and then the Assyrians came and took the northern tribes captive. And the kingdom of Israel in the north was no more ever again. There was only the kingdom of Judah in the south, which became known as the Jews. But from the beginning of the kingdom of Judah, there were already some people of those other tribes in the kingdom of Judah. It wasn't like this. It was separated more along geography than it was along tribe, because they were all one people, essentially. People from the tribe of Dan routinely could marry the people of the tribe of Asher, and your tribe membership was determined on other bases. I forgot how they figure out exactly which tribe you're technically from, probably wherever your inheritance is coming from, I guess. I don't know. So you can be of different tribes living in different parts of the nation. The northern tribes did not, when the kingdom was destroyed, they didn't come, like after the Babylonian captivity, which came next, the kingdom of Judah was also taken captive. But they had a return that is written of in the scriptures. You can read about it in Ezra and Nehemiah, where they return and begin to rebuild the city. And that's the city that Jesus encountered, Jerusalem. Because the city was destroyed by the Babylonians. The temple was burned to the ground. And it was rebuilt under the authority of the Persians, when the Persians conquered the Babylonians. Well, those who returned were not only of the tribe of Judah. There were other tribes present. And it's mentioned in Ezra and Nehemiah. There were small numbers of every tribe who returned, and at least who were numbered in the original return. And there was, but the thing is, but they did return. Some returned from the Assyrian. He promised that some would return from the Assyrian captivity. They did. But many in the Assyrians slew or carried away captive, and many of those who were carried away captive never returned, and they were cut off from being considered God's people. God said he would do this. And some people think like, oh, well, those people then migrated into Europe and became the white race, all right, which is wrong. There was already plenty of white folks up in Northern Europe, all right, plenty. It wasn't like it was newly settled in the 6th century BC. That's bonkers. You know what I mean? And it was promised, according to the scriptures, that they would be left few in number among the heathen. The idea that they would go up and they would conquer Europe or something is just total fantasy. It didn't happen. I have an email I have to respond to. Someone who responded like, I don't see a lot of specific refutations of what E. Raymond Capt said. Because what E. Raymond, it's like refuting, you tell me you've got a purple dinosaur in the basement. Right? I've got a purple dinosaur in the basement. Refute it. Without me going there? No, you can't. No. Well, he's not there now. Let me put it this way. Growing up, we kept a purple dinosaur in my basement. Pictures? No. Evidence? No. I just say so. Refute it. Because that's what refuting these theories is like. You have to refute evidence that doesn't exist. Oh, they have evidence. They made it up. E. Raymond Capt made up these funny little maps he had with arrows showing the migrations, but that's just made up. That is literally made up stuff. It's not based on any kind of archaeological finding or any sort of historical records. It's just based on the fantasy of people like E. Raymond Capt. It's all fantasy. There's no historic basis. There's no textual basis. There's no records. It's just something they literally made up. So refuting it is just refute it. How do you refute nonsense? I mean, you could refute. I mean, what I'm saying is like, prove I didn't have a purple dinosaur in my basement growing up. Well, it's ridiculous. That's not proving. You're just saying it's ridiculous. Prove it. Prove you did. Well, I got this drawing here of a purple dinosaur in my basement. I did when I was 4. I drew my basement. Here's my basement. You know, I had my basement, and this is just blank piece. And when I was 4, I made this drawing. And look there's a purple dinosaur in my basement. I don't know why I picked purple because that makes me think of Barney, but something crazy, something silly. I have a magic dragon in my basement growing up. Yes, and he granted me all my wishes. Unfortunately, all I did was wish for things like peanut butter sandwiches, so I don't really have much to show for it. So most of those people who were disappeared. And people say, well, they can't because the promises of God. Look at the promises of God were to Abraham, thee and thy seed after you. But Esau was excluded. And then the tribes. Well, look at later on down the road, like when in Benjamin there were certain sons of Belial who basically raped a woman to death. And they killed so many in Benjamin for it, they were afraid they might not be a tribe anymore. And so, but those men, and They were all cut off, slain. God, there are all kinds of promises in the Old Testament that when God says, I will not turn my back on Israel, he means the whole. Just like I said the other day, God loves the world, and the way he shows it by making some of us his sons. He loves mankind because he made me and you and the other people who are in this into his sons. And that is love for mankind, preservation of mankind, the salvation of mankind. He didn't have to say every single human to save mankind. Look at the flood. He saved Noah and his family, and thus he loved and saved mankind. Because he could have just destroyed mankind. You know? Same thing with Israel. He doesn't utterly he chastises Israel and cuts off some of the worst sort among them, but he does not turn his back on them as a whole. In every generation, God has his people. To this day, I mean, there are millions of people who don't have Christ. Wrong. I mean, that's so wrong. It's saying the Jews don't have Christ. Millions of Jews have Christ. It's just people don't realize how many Jews are Christians. I don't know if it's millions. It could be millions. I don't know. Lots. You run into them all the time. Because it's hard not to read the New Testament and say, like, boy, this is a great continuation of what we had going in the Old Testament. And boy, that prophecy in Daniel. The prophecy in Daniel. Christ had to appear within like 492, or was it 7 times 7 and 7 times 70? That's 400. 77 is 490. So it's 483 years. 69 sevens from the time of the going forth of the commandment to rebuild the temple. They knew Jesus was supposed to appear about the time he did. Messiah had to appear in the first century. So who could it be? You know? That's the question that they need to really look at. I was just thinking about things I've heard Jews say. I went silent there thinking about it. You know, I think some famous guy, people asked him, what do you think? And I go, I think he was a teacher, but for a Jew, blah, 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 blah. And I'd like to make him look at Daniel 9 and then go explore it, research what it means. I would tell him what I thought it meant is that 483 years after the commandment to restore and rebuild the temple, Messiah would come. And that's right at the time Jesus appeared. However you slice it, there were several commandments about the temple. There was like one that there should be a temple built, which was earlier. And then there was one to actually go do it. That's a lot of times people say, like, well, the first commandment to restore and build the temple was much before Jesus. Not much, but a little. But that was not a command to do it, but a command that it should be done. Meaning, we look favorably upon the idea of a temple being built, but they didn't provide any authority for them to actually do it. And so that's why I said there were several different commands and edicts issued by the king of Persia. I forgot what their official. I don't know if they had official title. They often do. Like Pharaoh, Egypt. Actually, a lot of the other nations had specific titles for their kings. Okay. Anyways, but it was all about the tribes, right? When we talk about Jews, we're talking about all the tribes, not just Judah. People say, that's just Judah. No, you're wrong. That's not just Judah. And here's evidence of it. Also, another piece of evidence is in the New Testament. When they speak of the tribes of Israel, they are speaking of the Jews. They do not have in mind any far-off people. When Jesus says, I am not sent but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, he means the Jews. And it's clear because that's who he goes to. He doesn't go off to some Gentile nation and say, guess what? I got amazing news for your people. You may not remember it, but you're actually the tribes of Israel. How about that? You know? Let go. We don't need to be like, I'm a Gentile. If you, as a Northern European, have any lost tribe of Israel in it, it's less than 1,024th that, like, Elizabeth Warren discovered what what happens. I mean, like, my family has legends too. You know, it was the opposite though. Is my family was in my family the legend is that they scalped Indians, or not scalped, skinned them. You know, and in revenge and stuff like that. Because I have ancestors that go back in American history to the 1600s, the late 1600s, I believe. I have to look at my. I could be wrong. But it very early, you know, early 17s, early 16s. I think it was early 16s. Not, late 16s, sorry. Like 1679 or something like that. Why does that number jump out? I don't know. But you know, I have a family tree. It goes back on my grandmother's father's side. I can trace my ancestors back. Right? And you know, but you know, and but there's no, like, you may not be aware, Elizabeth Warren was that candidate for president. She still is. But she claimed to be a Native American for years. But she was only 1,024th, maybe. Or maybe that was the low end. People say 1,024th, but they're not being very generous. It could be, but it was a range they gave. Between 256th to 1,024th, because it's always a power of 2. Power of 2 series, you know, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024. That's the exponential growth of, like, if you have a great grandfather who was of the lost tribes of Israel, you know, you are 1/16th, right? Great grandfather. Is that right? No. Wait, yeah, 1/16th, because it doubles every generation. No, 1/8. Sorry, you have 8 great grandparents. But you go back another, like, your great grandfather, you're up to 1/32nd, because you have 32 great grandparents, if that's right. You have 4 grandparents automatically, 8 great grandparents, 16 great grandparents. Of course, they're mostly dead, right? But what I'm saying is, your ancestry gets watered down real fast. And saying, I'm of the lost tribes of Israel, those people, like I said, there were already millions of people in Europe. Europe wasn't like this empty wasteland. There is archaeology for that. You know what I mean? Like 1000 BC, there was folks all over Europe already. The tribes of Israel didn't march into an empty land and then start becoming white folks. You know what I mean? It's just not what happened. It's like, it's just as, you know, as a white person, you know how you feel when you see the Afro-Israelites? And they're claiming they're all the Jews and all that, and you feel like, it's kind of uncomfortable. That's how what you're doing also. You're just as icky uncomfortable. It's like, like it or not, the Jews are the Jews. All right? For everybody. I'm not one, you're not one, unless you are one. You know? And you don't need to be. I'm quite happy to be descended from barbarians and whatever. It's like, because God has shown his mercy towards me and made me, I don't have to, like, have my ancestors come from this great pedigree. And read the Old Testament. You sure you want to be descended from those people? Are you sure you want to be from those who question God? I mean, half the persecution of the Jews comes from stuff, at least people have justified it based on things they read in the Bible. It's not a proper justification. Like whenever I hear about, people claiming to be Israel, I was like, you're claiming to be people who were multiple times, who over again and again offended the Lord, stumbled in their faith. What heritage are you taking hold of? The same heritage I'm taking hold of by just taking hold of God's grace, because they were God's children and God's people by God's grace more than any other thing. It was because of his mercy, because his mercy did not depart from them. Well, we have that in Christ. I don't need to be a Jew to have God's mercy. And even if you are one, if you do not keep the covenant, God will not necessarily, he's under no obligation to cajole you into being his people, because he has others he can do that with. As long as he's keeping covenant with the nation as a whole, he doesn't have to keep covenant with every individual. He can call the herd, and does, and has. It's not a heritage that's like any more sterling. At least my ancestors had an excuse. We didn't know anything about these things. My God, ancestors from the North Sea region, Baltics, and from the British Isles, from the main part of Europe, from the south a bit, well, a quarter. All heathen people. And might I be 2048th Jewish or Israelite? I don't know. I wouldn't see what the point is. What would the point be? What would the benefit to me be now, since none of those ancestors knew God? It doesn't give me any more godly heritage. Oh, I'm descended from the people God rejected. That makes me proud. They forget why they were cast off. Why did they go wandering? But God would never reduce his covenant with his people. He didn't. He brought back some of them, such as Anna's family, of the tribe of Aser. Now, they didn't detail every tribe, but you can piece together. You can see they're all there. Or some of them. I don't know that there are none. I don't have evidence that every single tribe is present. But I have enough evidence of different tribes being present in the tribes of with Judah to know that they're not gone. And you can go, like I said, I didn't prepare it right now. I don't want to go digging around in Ezra and Nehemiah, but if you look in Ezra and Nehemiah, you'll find there are also people of other tribes in small numbers returning. You say, but Paul, the numbers are small. Yeah, well, but think about it. In a few generations, not so small. And remember, when they returned, they didn't have a kingdom anymore. So it wasn't the kingdom of Israel and Judah. They just became known as the Jews because they were of the kingdom of Judah, and that's what everyone called them. But within their own nation, they called each other by their tribal names of the tribe of Aser. She was of great age and lived 100 years from her virginity, and she was a widow of about 4 years, which departed not from the temple, but served God with fastings and prayers night and day. So she had a husband for 7 years. From the time of her virginity, so let's say from about 15. Meaning from she was a virgin until she got married. They married fairly young, so let's say 15. She had a husband because otherwise she's very old. But then she was widowed for 4 years. So she's like over 100. Fourscore is 84 years. 4 is 84 years. So if I said 7 plus 22, that's 106. I know, that's why I made her nice and young, because I was like, I'll make her 20, 27, then we get up to higher hundreds. 106 is old. My wife, likes when people live really long, and is a big fan of that. But I'll say 100. She's about 106. Minimum, anyways, right? Minimum 106, maybe minimum 104, probably 106. They didn't really marry much earlier than 15. They might be betrothed much younger, but So she was a widow for 84 years. And that's impressive because, if you think about it, Paul said women who are young and widowed, they should probably remarry because they won't be able to stay that way. It's like a lot to ask someone to stay alone for so long. But she did. She stayed in the temple. Now, does that mean she lived there nonstop? She was a fixture. Because it says she departed not day, fastings and prayers night and day. This is what I mean about idioms and understanding figures of speech. Because it does not mean that literally. It never meant that literally. It's not supposed to make you think like she was like 84 years, man. She never set foot outside of the temple. Not even go to the bathroom. Because there's no bathrooms up on the temple. You can bet on it. Because you can't defecate in the temple grounds. It would be unclean. You can't menstruate on the temple grounds. That would also be unclean. You can't do that. You would be ceremonially unclean and excluded. And of course, these exceptions are of course not when she's menstruating. Of course not when she had to go to the bathroom. Of course. What do you think? What are you, ridiculous? Some people are. Some people are. They don't understand that it'll say like, hey, everyone's going to be there. Or hey, she was in there all the time. Day and night. I mean, like as not, you walk into the temple night or day, she was there. You know what I mean? Like as not, she was there. And there are people like this to this day, like old people who will attend Mass 7 days a week. Like Catholic Church, because they do Mass 7 days a week in many churches. And there are some folks that are there all the time, praying day and night. Always faithful to the temple, never departing. I mean, meaning never like just quitting it for a while. Menstruation doesn't count, and neither does using, whatever. But she was very faithful to come and pray there every opportunity. Whenever she could be there, she was there. As far as when she lawfully. I don't mean like, well, I'm busy. I got an appointment. I got to go to the beach and get some rays or some nonsense. No, I was no, like, I need to go to the hairdresser, so I can't be at the temple today. No, she was at the temple day and night. At every opportunity, praying, fasting. For 84 years of her widowhood. She was a prophetess. It said so. That's the thing is that people a lot of times don't understand is that women are routinely prophetesses, which is the word for a female prophet. And there is no, people say, well, can a woman teach? Well, she can be a prophetess. I don't know. Prophets are greater than teachers. I mean, but for some reason, I think because what the people don't understand is that, I guess when it says, I suffer not a woman to teach, Paul talks about those things, right? But it's clear that the Lord makes women into prophets. You know what I mean? And a prophet can be a kind of teacher sometimes, right? Or a teacher can be a kind of prophet. Sometimes there's some overlap. But there are scriptures that say that women, I don't suffer a woman to teach. But that whether or not that is a command or a preference is not entirely clear in my mind because of the nature of Greek society wherein women were kept very closely cloistered. Or, there were temple women, priestesses, but that was different. A lot of that it was more of a prostitution ring than it was any kind of religious authority. And prophesying serves for a different purpose than teaching. It means you speak for God. I've often said, my wife for me, she's like my personal prophet, and she speaks from God to me. This happens very often. The Lord speaks to her for my sake. I need to have someone close to me speaking to me. I can't, because of the way I live, because I don't have a church to call home at this time. But I don't forsake the gathering together and all this nonsense. People get upset if you don't go to a weekly lecture when most of the things you're getting, I need this. You need fellowship. I get more fellowship than most people who attend church. I guarantee you that. I get more Christian fellowship and communication between brothers than most people do in church. So, and I'm not against people attending those things. In fact, if you need fellowship, you need to go to church because, if you lack it, you should bounce yourself off other believers. It's something you should have. You should have company with them. I keep company with other believers all the time. My wife often, though, speaks to me at times when I need to hear a word from God. She will speak, and it's the voice of God for me. For my moment, it's God's word. It may sound weird to some people, but it is. It's not unusual. And I, of course, to her. As much as anybody else. I speak sometimes in the most intimate moments when we're most vulnerable is when God has the most to say. Like people who are like a lot of times in church, there's no way for prophesying to come because people are all shut up. You know what I mean? And for God to give me knowledge, like he'd have to work a miracle of letting me know what your problem is. Some people treat prophecy like some sort of psychic friends network. And I've seen this. I was in a church once and they had a guy come in and he had a weird haircut. I just always remember that because he styled his hair with like the spike on the top. And I was like, that's weird. And maybe that's part of the whole mystique and the thing, whatever. But he came around and he was like doing cold reading on people. And I know all about cold reading. Prophecy isn't cold reading. It's speaking with the voice of God, the right things of God, by the Spirit of God. And so a woman can do this. A woman can teach also, I think, I don't think that necessarily it was, in Paul's time, it was not wise for a woman to stand up in front of everybody and be the teacher. That would give great offense to the people. Like, look at what they're doing. They have women teaching. You know what I mean? What'll it be next? Children? What'll it be next? Slaves? You know what I mean? And so you understand, it's like in the South, like it was illegal to teach blacks to read. You know what I mean? When certain people are kept under, it's like, they're teaching Negroes to read. Can you believe it? What's the world coming to? It was something they feared. They want these people to have knowledge. And so sometimes in order to not run afoul of the authority, Christianity isn't all about defiance. It's about preaching the gospel. Defying authorities. I can be a slave and be a Christian and you can't stop me. There are certain things I cannot compromise on. But it's like, you don't want me to teach in public. But, I wouldn't let it be seen at that time. Now I don't know. I generally say, if it seems unseemly, then don't. Like if you're in a church where it offends people, don't do it. But it's like someone once asked me, "Oh, can I write stuff?" You can write stuff. It's like it's one thing another to have everyone sit down and you impose something on them. Everyone sit down. We're gonna have a speaker. And you're imposing something on them. It's another thing when it's like someone's either walks up to you or you know what I mean, like where it's like impromptu. It'd be like saying I could never learn anything from a female. I can always learn. My wife has taught me many things. She hasn't acted in any official capacity as a teacher, but she's taught me many things. So anyways, I think it should be careful. It's like, don't give offense. If it'll offend people, I wouldn't let a woman teach either, But I know that in the world, it's sort of like they want women to do everything now. And that's fine. Like, and my thought was like, you couldn't find a decent enough fellow to do it. That's kind of a shame. Like there was no guy who could do this. If we're falling so, if we're so short of men of God, we're so short. Because like it or not, people like to listen to men. People like to see a strong man in authority. They like it. Men and women, they like seeing a man in authority. Because men were kind of built for authority. We not only look at, we just historically. It's built deep into our DNA. You know? It's like when we're relying on something weak to lead us, it's unsettling. And I'm sorry if that offends anyone. But it's true. That's why women, like I say, when they marry, they want to marry a man who makes more money than they do, they don't want to marry a guy who is less intelligent, less. Women don't marry down. They don't. It's in our culture. They talk about it all the time. Women can't find husbands because of what? Because they want to have a guy who, they're all having careers and they want a guy who has an even better career than they do. In the meantime, they're pushing men out of college. They're pushing them out of college. They're driving them out of things. It's like, yeah, you're not going to have anyone. You're not going to be able to find anybody. And who among us wants to marry that? Honestly, we don't. I don't want to marry someone who's going to, lord over me. And that's the problem. Is oftentimes, one of the cliches about men is that the rule of men is like, we're gonna lord it over. Obey me, fetch me a sandwich. That whole stereotype that obedience means I'm just gonna say a lot of childish things and command my wife to just do this and that. It's like, that's not what I do. What it is when we have decisions we make throughout life, and sometimes we can't agree. And the default is, we can just end this argument. We're going to do what I say. We're going to do what I say. Period. And if you don't like it, you must accept it. Period. And if you can't, in some level, like, if you can't do that, your wife won't respect you. You'll have a terrible relationship. And the thing is, they will try. They can't help themselves. They by nature, I feel like women by nature press up against men. They want to test them. They want to see what you can take. What are you made of? They want to know you're strong. Be strong. Don't be a jerk, though. You know what I mean? They don't like that. Be strong and kind, and gentle, but firm, steadfast. And say, if it's wrong, then I'll be wrong, and you'll have been right. But this is the right way. It's like, we're going to do it my way because I'm convinced. And it's like, then I'll take the blame too. Someone's going to take the blame if they're wrong. But I'm the head here. Someone's going to be. Someone's going to be. And if you let her do it, there's going to be no end to the trouble. Don't let her do it. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be convinced. It's like, you've convinced me. Okay. Making sure that you're yielding your will. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being convinced. You don't have to always just like stick to your guns and be just stupid about it. It's like, well, you're right. I say we'll do it your way. There was one Anna, prophetess, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Aser. Okay, blah, 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 blah. All right, so. And she coming in that instant gave thanks likewise unto the, oh boy, I'm running out of time, unto the Lord, and spake of him to all that looked for redemption in Jerusalem. She gave thanks like Simeon gave thanks. Oh, now I can finally see it. These two old prophets and a prophetess in the church, in the temple. I'm saying in the church. They are well known among the people. And this child comes in, and they're saying, "Oh, wow! Look I finally have seen the salvation of God." These two really old people. I mean, I assume Simeon is old. Did I say Samuel? Simeon. And I assume Anna is quite old. Well, I know she's quite old. It said how old she was. She was probably older because they would tell the older one. Like, she was old. Very old. He was kind of old, probably. On all them, they would probably be aware of all those who looked for redemption in Israel and say, the child has come. The Messiah is born. We saw him in the temple. Our eyes finally saw him. And when they had performed all the things according to the law of the Lord, all things according to the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee, so in the city of Nazareth. There were certain things that had to be performed concerning the child, and this is just a short way of saying, like, all the things according to the law which had to be performed concerning the child were performed. And then they returned to Nazareth. And so we will pick it up with verse 40 tomorrow, and hopefully wrap up this chapter tomorrow. Sure. Right, Paul, right. How many verses did you get today? Well, 5 verses? Okay, well, I think there's a lot to say there. There's a lot of important, they may not seem initially obvious. Here's why the exposition of the study gets so long, because there are so many things out there, and it provokes thought. It may not, when Luke wrote down that Anna was of the tribe of Aser, he had no idea how important a detail that might be in the future. He had no idea that the Holy Spirit inspiring him may have had some idea that these clues should be left, no doubt. But he wouldn't have known that was an important detail. She was of the tribe of Aser. It was an important detail. Because some people think that it's only Judah and Benjamin. What's this lost tribe doing there? Who are her parents? Was she the last of that tribe? No. And I would actually go tomorrow, well, let's see. The study is formally over. But like I said, the reason I do this is because, see what I'm doing here? Let me show you an interesting little thing I do with my Bible collection software. You could probably do this online. I don't know. I started using this years ago, and I liked it so much. I don't know if you can even still get it. Like I said, I found it in the bargain basement bargain bin. Sorry, bargain basement. You goofball, Paul. Bargain bin at Menards. So let's look at let's try. I think Reuben, Reuben. Oh, not all. Well, for all, yeah, sure. Oh, it's all right. Wait. All right. I didn't even spell. Let's see. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I thought. What tribe was it? Was there some of Dan? Oh, Adan, Daniel, the son of Dan. Okay, well, maybe I have to look in that again. Again, I kind of took a risk there and looking back. There are a couple of tribes named in the return. And I was going to look them up in Bible collection. Like Naphtali and stuff. There are a couple of the tribes mentioned returning with Ezra and Nehemiah. In the genealogies listed there. Maybe I should should I try harder? Should I try harder? Let's try harder. As long as so I can at least not end it being on a defeat. Naphtali. No. I misspelled Reuben. Let's say tribe. Let's start with that. 12 he goes. Ezra 6:12. That's probably the offering. No, I need a genealogy. Maybe it's at the end. I don't know. Oh, well. Anyways, like I said, that's officially over. We'll pick it up with verse 40 tomorrow. And maybe I'll just sit here real quick after the study and look it up. That way tomorrow I can just in passing mention it. Yeah, it's mostly the men of Judah and Benjamin. But I could have sworn there was some other tribes mentioned at this time. Maybe there was another one. Certainly there are the sons of Levi mentioned. They're the Levites, sure. We got the Levites, sons of Banji, Hashun, Malak. I'm just like going right into the things, Nebo. But anyways, but the fact that you see them in the New Testament means that they were there. This is all the sons of Levi. And the priesthood would be the most important. It might have been in Nehemiah instead. But the priesthood would be the ones who would be most important to have the genealogy named. So, I don't know. I'll look into it. Probably should, because I've mentioned it several times. Well, I mentioned the part in the New Testament several times. But Ezra and Nehemiah is not a book I've studied in years. I've stopped off there to pick up some verses, but it's mostly just the documentation of returning from captivity and etc. So I'll see it. I'll be here tomorrow. I won't see anybody because I don't see anything except these scriptures in front of me. Until then, have a nice day.
Nevertheless, the dimness shall not be such as was in her vexation, when at the first he lightly afflicted the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, and afterward did more grievously afflict her by the way of the sea beyond Jordan, in Galilee of the nations.